All right, welcome to Cwic Show today. Today is June 11th, 2026. And we're going to cover a few different topics. I'm going to follow up a little on the now national news of the Mormons being left off of the approved list with the Department of War, and then the Christian category getting removed to satisfy the outcry that was put out there. But a couple of national news reports that were made on this that I want to cover, and a couple of comments that were made from those that are not LDS about how we're not Christian, and why, again, I think it's just important that we continue to fight for that. I think that's it's crucial, in quite frankly, I think. And then I want to talk about the mayoral race in Los Angeles and how the media is treating this and why this is also so important. This is about the integrity of our democracy. And it's not just about the fraud, it's also about the candidates. And I want to cover that and put some depth to those that are running in, and apparently the runoff between the remaining two candidates. And then I want to talk about the UK immigration and what's happening there. I've got some thoughts on this. I'm concerned. I think that you are looking at, as some people have brought up, what could possibly be some type of civil war in the UK. I don't think that is going to happen, but I think that there is going to be violence, and I'm concerned about this. And it's one of those things where you got to walk the edge of the sword, and if it comes to having to make certain decisions, then you come to those decisions. But I think you've got to stay on the edge of that sword and not just in a reactionary state. And then lastly, I just want to talk about, it looks like we are now again, from the previous bombing because of the attack on the Apache helicopter, it looks like we are now going after him again. And President Trump earlier this morning put out a post on Truth Social saying that we're actually going to go after Carg Island. That may be words, but we'll talk about that. So this episode is brought to you by the Alaska Frontier Cruise. This is with myself, my wife, and Elaine and Steve Dalton. Very excited about this. The Daltons are some of the best people in the world. I've traveled with them several times. This is going to be September 5th through September 12th, 2026. And you can see how the itinerary here will be departing out of Seattle, getting to Sitka, Juneau, Icy Strait Point, Ketchikan, Victoria, and, of course, returning to Seattle. It's going to be fantastic. Get out in the wild life out there in Alaska on the beautiful coastline and spend a week with us talking, and we'll give some presentations, and it's going to be, I think, a really special, fun time. To find out more or to register, go to cwicmedia.com, cwicmedia.com, go to the trips and events at the top, and scroll down to Alaska Frontier. Here we go. All right, so first I want to go over to the AP and their headline that came out, get it here, a Pentagon list overhaul puts Mormon churches' Christianity identity back in the spotlight. And this is important. And a lot of people say, why do we even have this? Why is this conflict even there? Why do we allow this? It's a nothing burger. It's, at the very very least, whether you agree with fighting for the name of Christian or not, it puts this type of thing back into the public discussion. And I think that's really important. It's like when the Book of Mormon musical came out. And I remember my aunt, contacting me and saying, this is horrible. Why are we doing this? I can't believe what they're doing. And this is so bad for the church. And I don't think it was bad for the church at all. Not at all. Now, that doesn't mean you don't stick up for it. That doesn't mean that you don't go in and say, excuse me, but that's not true. We don't believe in this or this or this. Fine. But it does put it back into the subject of the church, into a national discussion. And I think that's important because you know what? There are so many mists of darkness and veils that are put over who we are from so many different directions. The media, certain factions of Christianity that don't want people to know who we are. They're going to disparage us no matter what. Some to a very vile degree. And so it's like, you don't know. It's like, I would never check them out. I would never take a look at them, which is one of the main reasons I think that it's so important that we fight for the name Christian in there, not to be part of the club. That isn't it. That's ridiculous. I don't care if we're part of the club. I care about the perception. And that's important. I care about the perception that they understand that we believe in Jesus Christ, that he's our Savior and our Redeemer. And I will fight for that. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But I'm going to fight for that. So here's the Pentagon list overhaul puts Mormon church's Christian identity back in the spotlight. So imagine someone who doesn't know anything about the church and they're going through this. They're going to see the words, thank you for senators and others who are doing this. They see the words of Senator Lee talking about how we are Christian, what we believe in, the video that he put out. How can we not, this is what we believe in. That's something that is important to get out there. Senator Curtis from Utah doing the same thing here, right? He says Latter-day Saints are among the most patriotic, service-oriented individuals in our country. Curtis posted on X in defense of his faith. He said they are also unequivocally Christian. Just look at who is in the name of the church. So to me, the people that are going out and saying they're fighting this against being a part of the Christian group, I don't think you understand the positioning here. You think it's about us versus them, the Christians, the mainstream Christians. It has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it, with the importance of fighting for the name. So, the accusations of this is all you're doing, Greg, is you're out trying to become part of a group. Anybody who follows me knows that isn't true. The important is the perception that is created out there. And this helps, especially when it gets national news like this. And then you get scholar Matthew Bowman coming in and giving a description of what we believe and contrasting it. And understanding that, sometimes people don't call us Christian because we don't believe in the Trinity. Right, and he gives a difference between basically the Trinity and the Godhead. He says they believe that while the three have a relationship, that's us, they are distinct beings. So you're getting doctrine that's being put out there by the AP News, Mormon doctrine, that is important for people to understand and have this, understand the distinction that we believe in Jesus Christ as our Redeemer, but we believe in a different nature. We could say that, a different nature of God. It also says here from the article, Latter-day Saints also reject the Nicene Creed, which emphasizes the doctrine of the Trinity as one divine being. So for those of you, again, that are arguing so much about, you're just trying to be a part of the group, or this is what, look, this is also being brought up. A real distinction here in the AP News, giving a distinction between what we believe and what other creedal Christians believe. It's a good thing. Here's Senator Mike Lee in his video. This is over on the Jerusalem Post.
The faith of the American people has always been one of its greatest strengths, as is the fact that the Constitution prohibits the United States government from treating people differently based on their religious beliefs, regardless of what denomination they might be drawn toward, they might belong to, or whether they have any faith at all.
Okay, so he's going to the constitutional basis of government should not be deciding who's Christian and who's not. And that's basically what they do by putting that category together, listing every other denomination as Christian, except for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So important things. Now let's get to other reactions here of some that don't like the discussion of, and think of this also, if it's individuals that don't like this, there's a reason they don't like the discussion. They don't like the idea that Mormons are Christian. They completely reject it. And so ask yourself this, is it a good thing that are Mormons Christian put out there as a question nationally and put into the consciousness of the American people and beyond? I think it is. This is Gary Michael Voris, who has a following here on X of 32,000 followers. This is what he has to say about whether Mormons are Christian.
Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. The pretty good, solid, conservative senator from Utah, Mike Lee, went on X to kind of exclaim his outrage and said, Why were the Mormons? Why is LDS, Latter-day Saints, why are they excluded from the list? Why aren't we on the list? What we're not Christian? He sort of left the question hanging there. No, you're not Christian, actually. Okay. What's the basis, the absolute...
Okay, I love this. So this is important. Again, we're having others explain the differences. And of course, a lot of times those are memes. They're regurgitated garbage. It's Galatians 1:8. It's Revelation 22. It's a lot, different Jesus. Your polytheists, all these things that are labels that are meant to confuse and don't have a whole lot of critical thinking involved with them. But this does, and this is something that does get out there into the ether that I think is important that people can think about, because they usually don't hear this. So we're getting some help here from our Catholic friend.
Base foundational belief of Christianity. Most people would say, well, believing in Jesus. Nope.
Okay, so he's saying nope. I will say that is the number one thing, that if someone just says, are you Christian? What they're really asking is, are you atheist? Are you agnostic? Are you Muslim? Are you Hindu? Are you Jewish? Right? And they're putting a circle around, do you worship Jesus Christ? That's the number one thing, and why the perception is so important. Now, the biggest reason that people say we're not Christian is what Gary here is about to say.
Foundational, absolute bottom line. Can't go any lower. Theologically, philosophically, nothing. Can't go any deeper than this. That God is three persons, three divine persons together in one unity. That's it.
And that's it. And that's exactly what it is, right? That's exactly what it is. It's the nature. And so, of course, Latter-day Saints' argument on this is, yeah, exactly. That's your argument. And we would say it's not even a biblical argument. So it's, especially for those that believe in sola scriptura, it's, why are you bringing something that is produced and articulated a few hundred years after the life of Christ and not found in the Bible? Now, there's an interpretation of the Bible, but we have our interpretation of the Bible. And there is no specific, the word Trinity does not show up in the Bible. This is not about being an argument for or against the Trinity or for or against the Godhead, but I'm just trying to say why it's important that this does get out there. And I think the news for all of this is not just a nothing burger. I think it's important that people learn about these distinctions. We don't believe in coercion, but we do believe in persuasion and especially awareness so that people can make a choice. And that is what this has helped accomplish. All right, enough with that. Now we're going to get over to the Los Angeles mayoral race. You've got Nithya Raman and Karen Bass, who look like they are the two, unless something changes from a legal demand here from the courts. It looks like these are the two that are going to be in the runoff for the mayorship. And this is how the media is covering this. And I'll get to the ballots here in a minute. But take a look at the headline here with The Guardian. Nithya Raman edges out Spencer Pratt. Wow, amazing. They got just enough. These stalling of counting ballots that's happened over the last 10 years in different elections is unbelievably suspect. And edging out someone in the last hour, Spencer Pratt had said that there were 43,000 votes came in. There's roughly 43,000 homeless. There's now video showing that they were bribed in order to, which is, by the way, I've got a question on this. If and maybe you know the answer to this, but if you are homeless in Los Angeles, and you're in these large camps of homeless people, how many of those individuals are actually California residents? And how do you know? Are they showing a driver's license? Maybe they are. Maybe they're attaching somehow a driver's license. When people are going around collecting signatures on these ballots, are they getting pictures of the ID? And I know that there's the laws in California make it really easy to be fraudulent. I think they want it that way. But how do you know? How could you possibly know that someone in those camps is a resident of California? They don't have an address. That could be somebody from Denver or Seattle or from Phoenix or anywhere else, inside of California. How do you know they're a resident of Los Angeles and established a residence where they should be able to vote in that election? But Nithya Raman edges out Spencer Pratt to face Karen Bass in LA mayoral runoff. Now look how they describe this. Progressive challenger. They're not talking about Karen Bass here. They're not talking about Karen Bass, the progressive Democrat. They're talking about the Democratic Socialist, Nithya Raman. They are normalizing democratic socialism by moving it over a category toward the center of progressivism. Now, granted, I understand the definitions of progressivism and what that means. And yes, in some ways, a democratic socialist fits under progressive, and AOC is called progressive, and Bernie Sanders can be called progressive. But nowhere in the headline here are they saying a socialist. Right? This is Mott and Bailey. This is a Mott and Bailey approach. They are not going to call that out. They're going to keep that quiet for the most part. What you really have in the runoff in Los Angeles is the incumbent as a progressive Democrat against a socialist. And that is not framing in any different way. I'll show you exactly where she says she's a socialist and who claims her in their movement. Right, so just notice that in their reporting on how they're classifying these two, and I've seen the same thing with Mamdani in New York. Sometimes they'll call him a progressive because it's not quite as bad as being a socialist in the media and to the American, zeitgeist. They're not going to accept that. A lot less likely to accept that, right? But everybody that is organizing for her, everybody that is pushing Nithya Raman over Karen Bass, that whole entire movement comes from a socialist movement. A Marxist socialist movement, I will say. It's further than you think it is. It is. You'll look at the language and how they run this. It's all Marxist, and you could easily have here a socialist, a full-bred socialist in the top two cities in the United States by the end of the year. Think about that. And they're trying to place more and more and more. We've got one on the city council here right in Tempe, Arizona. And they're gaining ground. So back to the article here. The Guardian says that with many Democratic voters hanging on to their ballots, well, they didn't have them in the first place until the election's final days, and California's notoriously thorough, they're hilarious, notoriously thorough, but slow processing time for ballots. The results of some of the biggest races in the state remain unclear. Okay, so now buried down in the article here, they've got Raman listed here. Raman, a Democratic Socialist. Just stop and think about that for a minute. That this is not some mixture of democracy and capitalism with socialism. Just don't think that's what it is. That's not what the name is. Democratic socialism is simply implementing socialism through vote of candidates, even if it requires homelessness people. That's what democratic socialism is. It is not something shy of socialism. It's not a mixture of American values and free market and capitalism with some type of socialism that you might find somewhere in, let's say, Norway. It is full-on socialism, implemented and governed by elected officials. And how long will that last? So just understand that. We'll go to their website and show you what I mean. Again, here in the article, we have prominent California Democrats, including Governor Gavin Newsom and former Vice President Kamala Harris have supported Bass's reelection campaign, as have some of Raman's progressive colleagues on the city council. Okay, I don't know if there are any other officially Democratic Socialists on the city council, but again, they're trying to say she's progressive, which is bad enough, quite frankly, bad enough. I want to take a look at the website here for the Democratic Socialists of America. This is the organization. It's not a party yet. I think we're going to see this soon. But the Democratic Socialists of America, and let's see what they really focus on here at the top of their website. Number one, Democratic Socialists win. When the working class fights, we win, etc. Right? Second one, ask yourselves why they are associated with abolishing ICE. Now, I understand this is an entire Democrat Party push. The Democratic Socialists especially, right, the ones that are the socialists, Marxists, are the ones that are in bed the most with Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah and others. And you have to ask yourself, what in the world? How is that possible? I mean, fundamentally, you can't get any further left than unless you still had the USA Communist Party around, which is right what Angela Davis ran on that platform as a vice president a couple of times, who was mentored by Herbert Marcuse, who was a part of the Frankfurt School that completely destroyed our universities in the nation, in the United States. But why abolish ICE? Why do they want this? The whole idea of socialism and the socialist movement is revolution. It is to turn everything on its head. Everything. And get rid of American values, get rid of the Constitution. They won't go out and say that again. There's always a Mott and Bailey approach, but they'll hint to it sometimes, and every once in a while they'll let it slip out. What is their next one? It is no war with Iran. Same thing. Now you may have an opinion that you don't want to be in the war with Iran. I get that. I totally understand that. I disagree with it only because I think it's, to me, it's all about the nuclear bomb, period. It has nothing to do with Israel. Nothing to do with Israel for me. It is about the nuclear bomb. And if we don't take care of that, I think we're in trouble. Now, maybe they're lying to us. Maybe that's not what it is. Maybe it's a weapons of mass destruction thing from the Bush years. I'm not going to rule that out. But I have no way of knowing, and you have no way of knowing that. If it is about a nuclear bomb, then we have to stop it, period. Right? But here you go, right? It's anti-Israel. This is tax the rich. They just come out right out and say it, right? They are all about taxing the rich and fight oligarchy. So these are 20th and 19th century terms, oligarchy, that were used. Lenin used oligarchy all the time in his vocabulary, fighting the oligarchy, which are the very, very elite, rich people that are in control of whatever it might be. And you might agree, hey, we've got to fight them. Or, to me, I think what America does is it puts a check on them. Maybe not enough. But when you destroy the rich and you tear down what they've built, you're opening yourself up to absolute chaos. And you know who has to step in for that? The state. And that is part of their plan. It's the same thing. It's just the same thing over and over again. It's Leninism. He would say, fight the financial oligarchy, right? Get rid of Elon Musk. Get rid of Bezos. Get rid of Ellison. Get rid of all of these guys that are unbelievably rich because it's not right. It's not fair. Despite the fact that they produce so many jobs and so many amazing products. I don't agree with those guys in a lot of things, and they probably do have too much power. but don't destroy the system over it. Don't burn everything down. And that's what they want to do here.
It is a shocking but not surprising turn of events. In fact, many people and Polymarket seem to have predicted in advance that this was going to happen. How could they possibly have seen it coming?
So this is very interesting because Polymarket, is a great place to go to see what are the odds of something working out. It's like if you're betting on a game, what are the odds on the game? Usually the odds are going to win because there are people that are putting their money where their mouth is, and their money, because they put money on it, it matters to them. And they're going to really study it out and think about it and which team is going to win, right? It's the same thing with Polymarket. You can bet on anything. And so you can bet on the mayoral race here. You can bet on a presidential election. And in that Polymarket, those numbers changed, not a lot. They changed a lot later, right? It is as it went on, as the counting for the ballots went on with the 43,000. But before the ballots came in, you saw a little bit of a bump coming through Polymarket, which is very interesting.
So what I was hoping that we would do today is talk about why our elections look the way they do. And I will cut to the chase a little bit here and say that we are going to have an endless battle in which those of us who see what we believe is clear evidence of some kind of election rigging or fraud.
Yes, I mean, it's obvious. I'm sorry. It is obvious. It's not maybe. It's completely obvious.
Faced with indignation from a vast array of people portraying themselves as more rigorous and careful, who say, where is your evidence? Where exactly is your evidence that there was something wrong with this election?
And that's the question. And then now prove it. Prove it. Well, the problem is that the entire system is set up to make that proving very difficult. I mean, you're allowed to turn in votes late, beyond the end date of the election. So you can sign things and turn them in later, even signed later. You don't need ID. The mail-in ballot fiasco. There are so many problems with the elections and now as you watch this, whether you're fully believing that this race is rigged or not, and you're going, and what happened in Georgia, for example, and then on both sides calling it rigged. Hillary Clinton said it was rigged at first for when President Trump won, and she took a little longer to. She conceded and then didn't concede. And President Trump bringing up everything in 2020. And there's problems. There are a lot of problems. And all of us as Americans need this to work. You cannot have a democracy without a voting system that is truthful. We become a banana republic. And we're marching toward that right now. This is obviously can you say technically that all the rules were followed in Los Angeles? Maybe you can. Right, because of the way they've designed this. Maybe you can. You don't need ID. You can turn everything in late. You can drop 43,000 ballots from the homeless on the last day, or a day after the last day, or 2 days after, or 3 days after, and they still count. And, the system is set up for this.
And we are going to be caught in the following predicament. No piece of evidence is sufficient to establish that case. And the sum total of all of the evidence contains true things and false things.
Yes.
So it is also no good. So the question is, can you logically deduce that something has gone wrong? I believe you can.
Absolutely.
Easily. Can you prove it? No.
Okay. So that's the issue, right? Can you prove that something has happened here? And that is going to be tougher and tougher, because what happens is as you rig these elections this way, it's the system and the practice, combined here that allow for this. As these things are rigged, and I will call them rigged, then what you do is you bring in people that, because they've had success doing it this way, they are going to strengthen the policies and the system and the laws to allow for this to happen. And when you're in a place like California that is so dominated by one party, even those that might not believe in it might go ahead and vote for it because it's for their party. And at least we don't have the conservatives and the Republicans coming in. It's a spiral of power that is very difficult, I think, to break in a place like that, where you've got a very, very, very blue state. And how do you stop it? How do you make it? Well, they're trying to do it at a federal level. We'll see if any of that succeeds. But it's very difficult, I think, to make a change. By the way, on his desk there, you can see down at the bottom there, it's kind of fun because that is a scarab beetle, right? That is a dung beetle, the scarab in Egypt, which represents becoming. I wonder if that's why he's got it on there, if there's an Egyptian reference there. But that is the dung beetle, scarab, which represents to become. Now, all right, real quick on immigration. I just want to make a couple of points here on what's happening in the UK. They are moving toward possibly a civil war. And I say civil war, I mean constant violence. I mean something more along the lines of what has happened previously in Ireland, right, with the IRA, et cetera. I think that this could easily move toward that type of a civil war. Things are so bad, and yet everyone is putting their head in the ground and trying to tell you that it's not bad. And it's very difficult to tell you it's not bad when video exists everywhere and you're able to actually see what is happening. And there is a two-tier system for two-tier Starmer, right? So people are fed up, completely fed up. Now, I don't know how far this goes. Maybe it gets quieted down. I think that's what they're hoping for. They're always buying time, just like the Iranians. They're always buying time to move things down just a little bit further, get more and more immigration into the UK, set up their policies and organization as much as they can, solidify things, and try and keep it out of the public mind as much as they possibly can. But it's getting worse. And, you can go on and on with the scenes. You've seen them all and what's happening. And then you're not going to do this without counter protest, because the side that is going to push for immigration is very, very good at this. So here is a counter protest pro-immigration. Care for your families, ours needs security. Okay. And hey, that may be true for a portion of this group, maybe a vast majority. I don't know. I'm not there. You see that these two sides are building up and building up and building up, and it's very concerning to see what would happen. I will say with immigration, look, I'm all for immigration. I think it's and yes, even for Muslim immigration, if people are vetted and if they're willing to assimilate. And it's the whole process is, are you, it's kind of like the vetting process at BYU, which has become more stringent than it was before. And where it's, they've started to put elements of the family proclamation in here. It's like, okay, what about gender? What about marriage? What about the law of chastity? Do you follow these things? What are your thoughts on this? How do you support this? I don't know how those interviews are actually conducted sometimes, but it's a little bit more toward a temple recommend, right? It's the same thing with immigration. You got to go in and you've got to say, are you willing to assimilate? Here's a good question for someone who is Muslim, I would say, are you willing to, and this is tough, this is a really tough, and people won't like this, but are you willing to put Sharia law against our own laws and hold it up higher? And have them mark it. Now, maybe they're all going to lie. I don't know. But put that in. How about a vetting process of how many young men are you going to allow into the country from other countries as compared to women and children? Put that down as a mark, because if you've got, 70% of everybody coming into the country through immigration that are young men ages 18 to 35, you're going to have a problem. Sorry. Especially from places like the Muslim countries where there's such a different culture and a different religion and a different paradigm, worldview. Everything is so different. That doesn't mean everybody's bad, but it means the ability to come in and assimilate is a problem. And that means that you now get isolation with some of these individuals. You now end up with people that feel like they're on the fringe, on the border of society, which they probably are, some of them. And that's going to create bigger problems. And then you get animosity and resentment and a difference in, it's just not assimilation. So I do believe in immigration. I think it is, but I think you have to do it right. And that goes for the U.S. also. I believe in helping out all refugees that are actually here. I think that's the humane thing to do. And I'm in full support of that. But in terms of actually who is let in, I think we've got to be very wise and smart on that. And are you going to assimilate? You don't have to give up, your religion. You don't have to give up at least parts of your culture. But is the Constitution, how do you do that? I mean, and I don't know, maybe there's not a very good way of doing that. I don't know. But I think we need to move toward that a lot more. We need to focus in on that a lot more. Especially if someone is here with a green card or work visa, and then they're trying to stay. It's like, hold on. And lastly, President Trump now is bombing Iran again. I don't know what you think of this. This is his post on Truth Social. And he says here, the United States will be hitting Iran, whose Navy, Air Force, radar, anti-aircraft, and all other forms of defense together with most its offensive capability are gone. Very hard tonight. We're going to hit them very hard tonight, so they've done that. At some point in the not too distant future, we will be taking Karg Island. Now, these could just be words. He says a lot of words, and that's why people don't like him, because he's so bombastic, but this is part of his negotiating strategy. It's kind of like Iran's negotiating strategy. It's very similar. And they're going to take Karg Island and other infrastructure points and assume total control of their oil and gas markets, much like we have with Venezuela, which is working out brilliantly. That's a little bit different. It's not the same. How are you going to accomplish this? Are you putting people in danger? You don't have wild fundamentalist jihadis all over Venezuela. You might have some communists that will do some things, but it's not quite the same thing. And so, that's concerning. I'm not saying it's not the right thing. I don't know. But it's concerning that we're going to be putting boots on the ground, it looks like, if this goes through, if he's right, if he's not bluffing, that we're going to be putting boots on the ground in Iran. That is concerning, because then you've got targets, right? We now have targets in Iran. And we know how that went with Afghanistan and in Iraq. Right, it's just a bad deal. So we'll see how that goes. They could be bombing right now again during this recording. I'm not sure, but what do you think about all of this? What are your thoughts on the Iran war? And here's what I think: whether you're for it or you're not, if there's going to be, if Trump wants to make sure that there are no nuclear weapons being created, they have to go all out, right? You cannot take a Vietnam approach. You just can't tie one hand behind your back. You have to go all out to do it. And we don't like doing that. We've never liked doing that. We want just precision. We want, of course, as few deaths as possible. We want as little risk as possible. Of course, all those things are true. But unless you go all out on this, that is not going to be accomplished. And you may not want that. I understand. That might be what you want. That's all I've got for today. We'll talk to you again soon.